and good morning to you. For those of you that were expecting a live stream today, there is no live stream. It's an in-person only session today. It's Messy Church, which will be starting at 10:30 when this goes out. So Greg, if you can make it and come in time for lunch. Alternatively, rather than just leave you with nothing for today if you're not able to make it, I thought I would share something else that we've been doing. You may have seen this come up on our YouTube channel and potentially on the website, but what we started playing with, exploring, are some sermon discussion podcasts. These are in fact AI generated and at the moment have American voices, but I think you'll find, as I do, they're actually very good. So I'm going to leave you, rather than just cut the video here, I'm going to leave you with a little bit of a sample of the first one that we did for June. And there is another one available on the website, so go there. That's from the homepage. Click on services and then sermon TLDRs. The page there actually explains what TLDR stand for. So hope you enjoy and hope you like this little sample. Take care. See you soon.
Let's unpack this. We're doing a deep dive today, and it's pretty focused. Just one source.
Right. A single audio recording. A sermon from early June 2025.
And our mission is really just to listen closely to that sermon and pull out what it says about, well, listening itself.
Yeah, how we listen, why it's important, what makes it hard, or maybe even profound, all just based on this one recording.
And it kicks off with something really engaging, doesn't it, this activity?
It does, right at the start. The speaker describes getting 5 volunteers up.
And the rest of the congregation, they're just shouting instructions at them, trying to get them to draw something specific.
An abstract image, apparently. Something like a circle, line through it, triangle, some squiggles.
So picture that. 5 people trying to draw and just this wall of sound, everyone yelling different things.
Chaos, basically. Yeah.
Complete chaos. And the outcome described in the source, well, it wasn't exactly a success.
No. Lots of people apparently got the circle part. Maybe a line, maybe a triangle, you know.
But the key thing was, nobody seemed to capture the whole picture the speaker actually intended.
Right. And you, listening right now, you can probably imagine that scene. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What do you think made it so hard?
Because the sermon dives right into that, uses the activity as a jumping off point. Why is listening so difficult sometimes?
The volunteers actually shared their experiences. One said they couldn't understand, it wasn't clear.
Another mentioned misunderstanding something like line through the middle, drew something totally different.
And the big one, the obvious one, really was just too many people shouting different things all at once.
Just noise,
Okay.
conflicting messages, impossible to sort out, you know?
And the source draws a direct line from that to, well, our everyday listening struggles.
Right. Too much background noise, maybe we get different messages from different people, different perspectives.
And crucially, sometimes what we think we heard, or maybe what we wanted to hear, just isn't what was actually said.
The sermon really stresses that need to take time, be intentional, make sure we've actually heard accurately.
So acknowledging that challenge, the sermon then offers a kind of framework, a way to think about listening more effectively.
Suggesting we listen in, 3 different ways?
That's it. Listening with our head, with our heart, and with our feet.
Okay, let's break those down a bit based on what the sermon says. Head listening first.
Listening with the head, according to this source, is about the facts. You know, the technical stuff, the details, the basic information, what happened.
The data points, got it. So, heart listening.
That moves beyond just the data. It's about the emotion, the values underneath what's being said, how is the person feeling, what's really important to them.
And the source notes, that's harder for some people than the head stuff, right?
It does. And it makes the point that we actually need both kinds of listeners, people good with facts, people good with empathy. It takes both.
Makes sense. Okay, the third one sounds intriguing. Listening with the feet.
Yeah, this one is interesting. The sermon describes it as understanding the intention, the motivation behind the words.
Yeah.
Why is this person saying this right now? What's driving it?
Okay. So not just the what head or the how they feel heart, but the why feet.
Exactly. And the sermon pulls it together nicely, saying that when we listen with head, heart, and feet, that's when we get the best chance of hearing the whole person.
And it links this directly to a practical situation for that church community.
Yes, their process for discerning or maybe calling a new minister, how important it is to listen to everything that person brings, not just the resume, the facts.
But also their passion, their heart, and their sense of calling, their why, their feet.
Precisely. The whole picture.
Okay, so that's listening to people. But then the sermon shifts focus, doesn't it? It takes this idea of listening and applies it to, well, listening for God.
It does. It brings in that story from 1 Kings 19, verses 11 to 13.
And this is where it makes a really sharp contrast, I think. It reminds us how often God shows up loudly in the Bible.
Yeah, the burning bush, thunder on Mount Sinai, pillars of fire and cloud, big, dramatic, impossible-to-miss signs.
But in this specific story, the sermon points out God wasn't in the huge wind that shattered rocks, wasn't in the earthquake, wasn't in the fire.
Where was God found? In the gentle whisper, or, as some translations put it, sheer silence.
And the question posed right there in the sermon is pretty powerful. How often have we wanted that loud sign, that dramatic intervention?
Begging for clarity, maybe?
When perhaps, just perhaps, the real challenge isn't that God's silent, but that we haven't quieted the noise around us enough to hear that whisper.
It loops right back to that drawing activity, doesn't it? Imagine how much easier it would have been if one person had just quietly whispered the instructions.
Instead of all the shouting, yeah. The sermon shares a story here, too, an anecdote.
Right, about a reflective walk. During a Baptist Assembly event in West Bromwich, of all places.
Taking young people for a walk on an industrial estate doesn't sound very peaceful, does it?
Not exactly the prime spot for quiet reflection. You imagine traffic, factories, just concrete and noise.
But the story goes, they turned off the main road, found a residential street, and then stumbled upon a small park.
And the invitation was simple. Just be still, be silent, right there.
And even in that setting, surrounded by all the busyness, they could actually hear things. Birds singing, the wind in the trees.
A moment of stillness, of silence, found in a really busy concrete place, as the source puts it.
And that stillness, that quiet, is presented as key to hearing the gentle whisper.
Yeah, it's not loud. It draws you in. It means you have to lean closer, pay attention, actually put in some effort.
And the sermon suggests that this quiet kind of listening, this attentiveness, can create a deeper connection, maybe more intimacy than the big dramatic signs.
The beauty, it says, is that God can be found there, in the quiet sounds, the still spaces, if we make space for them.
Which leads to the reflection question for you, the listener. How easy are you finding it, really, to create those moments, those pockets of stillness and silence to maybe hear that quiet voice?
It's a challenging question.
Definitely.
Oh.
So, from individual listening to God, the sermon then widens the lens again, back to the community, listening together.
Especially in that context of discerning things as a church, like choosing a minister.
And this is where it drops that fascinating bit of Baptist history about the church meeting being, well, radical.
Truly radical for its time, yeah.
So what was the deal historically? How did decision-making work back then generally?
Well, the sermon gives us a specific date. A London Baptist church used ballot papers to call a minister way back in 1820.
1820, that sounds really early for voting, especially beyond just, rich men.
Exactly. The source points out the huge difference. Nationally, in 1820, people like Jeremy Bentham were pushing for universal suffrage, but it was a non-starter.
And even the Great Reform Act later, in 1832, didn't exactly open the floodgates.
No, it only expanded the vote from maybe 5% of the population, the wealthiest male landowners, to about 10%. Still mostly upper middle class, working class, women, still excluded.
So while the country was like that,
this Baptist church, the sermon claims, in 1820, gave every single member a vote.
Every member.
Male, female, young, old, rich, poor. The source specifically says the servant and the landowner, one member, one vote, equal voice.
Wow. That is genuinely startling for 1820. It completely undermines the social hierarchy of the time.
The sermon really emphasizes this. No single voice was louder because of status or wealth or gender. Everyone was heard. It calls this belief that every voice matters. Every member is needed to discern God's will together. Beautiful and wonderful and truly radical.
And this idea of collective listening, valuing every single voice, then connects to the final big concept the sermon tackles.
Right, linking it to Ephesians, the idea of the church reflecting the manifold wisdom of God.
Manifold wisdom. What did the sermon say that means exactly?
Not wisdom that's all the same, but wisdom found in its variety, its diversity. It's the differences that actually show its richness.
And it gives a whole load of examples from the sermon, doesn't it?
It really does. It says wisdom is both hand, not just either. It needs kids' perspectives, childlike insights. It's like a tapestry, many different threads needed.
It has breadth needs narrow thinkers and broad thinkers. It's variegated space for head people, heart people, gut responders.
Multifarious internal processors and external processors.
Mm.
People who are cerebral, emotional, somatic.
It lists all sorts of life roles, too. Homemakers, academics, people on the street, people in playgrounds, office workers.
Heads in the clouds, feet on the ground. It even mentions personality types like Enneagram numbers, Myers-Briggs J and P types.
Briefly explaining J as routine-liking, P as more flexible.
And the point is hammered home. All personalities, all types are welcome here. It lists demographics: too old, young, black, brown, white, active, still, book smart, street smart.
So the fundamental message extracted from the source isn't just diversity is nice. It's that wisdom itself is manifold.
Exactly. It takes the many and all their difference to reflect God's wisdom, or Christ, more clearly. The sermon puts it starkly. If wisdom was just you, there'd be no room for me. If just me, no room for you.
But together
Wisdom is manifold, richer, deeper.
Okay, so let's quickly recap this deep dive into the sermon source. We began with that messy drawing activity, a real illustration of how hard listening can be.
Then we looked at the framework it offered. Listening with head, heart, and feet to hear the whole person.
We spent time reflecting on listening for God, specifically that gentle whisper from 1 Kings, needing quiet and attention, not just loud signs. Remembered that walk on the industrial estate.
And we explored the radical nature of collective listening, highlighted in the source, the Baptist history example, valuing every voice, leading into that idea of manifold wisdom.
So the big takeaway, the core value woven through the sermon, seems to be about deep, intentional listening in all its forms.
Listening to facts, feelings, intentions. Listening for God's quiet voice. And listening to all the different voices in the community.
And the sermon presents this kind of listening as absolutely vital. For understanding, for wisdom, for figuring things out together.
And it leaves us, and you listening, with a final thought, a question really, pulled again from that 1 Kings story.
God asks Elijah, Elijah, what are you doing here?
And the source turns that question back onto us, onto you.
If God were to ask you right now, what are you doing here?
What would your answer be? Something to think about.